Hey guys, welcome to Electronic Dance Money, your number one business resource for making money as electronic musicians and producers. All right, sweet. Welcome back, you guys, to another episode of Electronic Dance Money. This episode's been in the works for a few weeks now, maybe close to a month. Super excited for this episode, though. Today, we've got NoFace Records, one of the co-owners of NoFace Records, and today, Denis Hiller, who is... he's been involved in the industry for a while now. He helps run one of the biggest record labels in the industry. If not one of the biggest, it's definitely one of the top rising ones for sure. He's ran marketing for Size Records with Steve Angelo and is also a tech entrepreneur from Silicon Valley. Denis, do you want to kind of give an introduction and talk about how you got involved with electronic music? I'd love to hear your story from the beginning. Go ahead and take the floor, man.
Well, Christian, it's so good to be with you and, of course, your audience. And I do appreciate what you're doing because, you know, we're in such an interesting time where there's so many roads you can take with music. And so I just wanted to say, first of all, that I appreciate you having me on and, you know, the opportunity to talk about what we're doing at NoFace, of course.
Of course.
As far as how I got into music and how that happened, it was like a beautiful accident. I never intended to be in music. So I, grew up in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, Silicon Valley. Ended up not going to college and was involved with a tech company that my buddies started. And, I was their first employee and learned marketing and PR, back then, which it was a bit unusual. Now it's DIY and learning as you go is a little more common. Back then, I was just making a bunch of mistakes and gathering info wherever I could. Anyways, ended up working in tech as an early stage employee for a tech startup, then another one, started another startup. And then basically what had happened is, my co-founders and I, we got into a little bit of a disagreement. And the same day that happened, my ex-girlfriend of 2.5 years broke up with me. And that relationship was a train wreck. It was done. But imagine two sort of catastrophic events all in the same day. And so I ended up a few months later getting out of the situation, and I ended up leaving all of that with money to live for a year. Okay. So I was like yourself, and I read an article you wrote about, taking breaks and working, but also, and that was really interesting. And, I was that kind of person too for many years where I would just go. And suddenly I stopped. Okay. And imagine you have enough money to live for a year, not like a king, but also not like a peasant either. And so I'd never gone out really, hadn't done any of that. And, I was sitting at home feeling sorry for myself. And finally, a friend of mine, and I was living in the suburbs of San Francisco, maybe 30, 40 minutes out. And a friend of mine, she was going out all the time. And she said, listen, enough sitting at home, come with me to this after hours party. I said, what's that? She said, look, it's an illegal rave. I said, great, let's go. I'm in. So we go, and San Francisco had a great scene at the time. I mean, they still have a great scene. And so, to make a long story short, we drive into this extremely shady alley. There's like security guards with leather jackets who are just kind of like bringing you in, checking to make sure the cops aren't there. All sorts of things were happening. And there's like this pizza parlor downstairs, and then upstairs there's this makeshift club. And there were 3 DJs playing and imagine, I mean, this thing was huge. It must have been at least 400 people. And this was a big illegal after hours party from 2 to 6 a.m. And so anyway, so we get there, I don't know, 2, 3 a.m., something like that. And more people are coming in. And there's this really great, sort of underground big room, all sorts of stuff. And so anyway, so there's these DJs playing, and there's a couple local DJs and another local DJ who's now my co-founder, business partner, very good friend, Max Vangeli, playing. I knew nothing about production, let alone DJing or any of that. I was just watching like a guy, like just seeing what was unfolding. And this was in 2008, and so I saw these other guys who were good. They were good, but they were technically good, okay? Max caught my eye because he was technically good, but he was also a showman. And so I looked at that. Like imagine there was like they made this makeshift DJ booth on a cheap sort of Costco table, and Max jumps on the table, nearly breaks it. He's crowd diving, something else. And I'm watching from the very back, holding a beer, and I'm like, look, I don't know what that is, but I am all for that and believe in that. Like whatever that is very authentic and very real and just connecting with everybody in the room. So fast forward, him and I, we ended up working together, and we both had a kind of a similar mission. So, I wanted to get into music. He wanted to, become a popular artist, tour the world, etc. And, we kind of set our eyes on that. And we built a little bit of a local team. And then on top of that, the other thing is, the time was right too, because this was 2008, and we worked through 2008, we worked through 2009. We were doing everything that we're now telling other artists to do. We did that with a lot less technology and opportunity. But there were also less people, I guess, in the space. But to make a long story short, as we were doing that, it was 2008. The market had just fallen apart. Everybody was going out. There was nothing to do. There was no work. And so it felt like the whole world was out and just wanted to forget reality and get into this whole electronic world. And San Francisco was lucky enough to have a scene before it became big all across the U.S. And as things started to come up, we took that momentum and just sailed like a ship and ended up worldwide. And this is, to Max's credit as a producer, because he was remixing artists like Cascade. He was doing huge tracks for Warner and all over the place. He of course got connected with the Size guys, so on and so forth. And that was the beginning of it. And then just to, I'll take a pause there. That's the beginning of it.
Yeah, when Max, he, you would say he's probably most notable for his remix with Steve Angelo on The Island, would you say?
Yes.
Yeah, because anyone who hears that remix, if they don't know who Max is, they're like, "Oh yeah, I've heard this before." It's a remix that's been played by everyone. I think it's been played on Sirius multiple times. So it is like the timing thing is interesting, because I think that is probably the most important part for a lot of producers that they don't realize is that's kind of one of the key ingredients to being a successful producer. Is just being at the right place at the right time, but also knowing when you should keep working at something and just kind of playing a waiting game. Like your time will eventually come. It's just how long are you willing to grind it out and wait for that opportunity to come. And I think there is a huge difference though between just waiting and hoping and kind of sitting around and waiting while also grinding and working. I think the two need to kind of be one with each other. And if you can accept that it might take a little bit longer, but you can keep working at it, I think you can build this momentum of success through those two things.
You know what? That's a really interesting point, because the way we approached it, and I think this is still kind of the way we approach it, maybe a toned down, more mature version of it, but we always had kind of the same outlook, which is we're a really big deal, you just don't know it yet.
Yeah.
Okay. And that in our local scene rubbed a lot of people in the establishment the wrong way. They didn't appreciate that, because they were doing this for X amount of years, and they're like, who are these people? And our attitude was, I don't know what you want from us. Like, all we're trying to do is grind. And, there's different forms of grind. There's very digital forms, right? Especially now. And there's more on the street kind of thing. Yep. And we did a little bit of both, you know what I mean? So we built our own promotions company. literally for no other reason than the fact that nobody in San Francisco at the time wanted to book Max as a headliner. So we said, okay, well, let's throw our own parties then. And you know, and putting up flyers, flying people, hiring promoters, going online, looking for remixes, digging in the forums, all of that. In other words, for whatever reason, we were convinced. We were absolutely convinced that we were going to make it. But at the same time, we were insanely impatient. I don't mean to the point of like stressing out and not being able to sleep, but from the point of, no, we have to do this now. Here's what we're doing, blah, blah, blah. And all, there's just a lot of energy because you're totally right. You can sit around and say, well, look, it's not my time, so I'm just going to not really do much. Or you can say, listen, I'm going to seize the day and do everything I possibly can to just move forward.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key things. A lot of the impatience is it's a tightrope. It's a fine line you have to walk, and be careful with it, because it's like you can either be too impatient to the point where you're going to overwork yourself. And I think that is where, part of that article I was writing about is, that was kind of where I was at, where I was super impatient. And so I just started to overwork myself way too much, to the point where I overworked it way too much, and I wasn't doing the strategical things I should have been doing. Whereas I didn't realize I don't need to be in the studio every single day for 8 hours a day. I could be in the studio 3 or 4 days a week, and then the rest of the days, or, be in the studio for a few hours, 3 or 4 days out of the week. And then the rest of my time could be spent on networking and marketing, figuring out promotion, doing all these other tasks that are so essential to being successful. And I think that's where a lot of producers they're in the same boat as well, where they're thinking that the production and being in the studio is all of it. And it is a big part of it. But the other half of it is the business-minded marketing aspect of being a producer that a lot of people kind of overlook. And it can create a lot of tension, and people having imposter syndrome is what it comes down to. Them feeling like a failure because they're not progressing. And they are progressing with music production, but they're not progressing in getting the record labels who they want to get signed to, or getting the fans that they want. And they don't realize that they're completely missing this other part of the industry, which is what this entire podcast is about. What is getting you to go full time. And to get there, you have to implement a whole number of things. And going off of that, the topic for today's episode is really just focused on what artists could do to start a record label. Because I myself, from the day I started producing, was like, I want to start a record label at some point. I think there's a ton of producers out there that feel the same way. I mean, you and Max were one. Max is the producer. You're kind of the guide. Now, would you say you do a lot of the marketing aspect of things and kind of the more business related stuff?
Yeah, so we have a great team at NoFace. So we have Max, who's doing the A&R side of things, definitely, and mentoring a lot of artists, which is definitely appreciated. If you look at, I mean, really what I'm doing is label managing, which basically means it's like being a bus driver and you're just trying to make sure that all the pieces are working. Okay.
Right.
And then we have Christopher, who you met, who is our in-house PR person, really great. And, he really works those records and does a lot of important things. And then we have, we have a couple artists who joined us in-house, which is great. They're teaching one-on-one lessons and creating tutorials and some really important stuff. And then we have Bernard, who is our artist relations. I mean, he does a bit of A&R as well, but a lot of what he does is artist relations, which is so appreciated because, we really want the community, whether it's the label community or artists signed or folks signed to our distribution arm, whatever it is, we just want them to have a really good experience. So, and we just kind of pass the ball around, if that makes sense. But initially when, so let me give you a little bit of background. So in 2016 or so, before I was involved, Max was approached, or he got, him and Armada got together and they decided to launch an imprint. And typically the way that works for anyone listening who's interested in, because there's kind of three ways of starting a record label. One way is you just get out and do it and nobody asked you to, and you just unsolicitedly open a record label. The other way is you are asked to open a record label. And the third, I need to go check a post because I don't remember what the third is. But here's the point. But here's the bottom line is, oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. You become an artist of a certain label. And the third, it's not even that, you just get a job at a label. Max was approached. And, those kind of deals are very specific to artists at a certain level. Because whether you're an Armada, whether you're Warner, whether you're Interscope, whoever you are, when you're at a certain level, you're approaching artists not to start a record label from scratch because you have a certain formula, you have money you're investing. You're looking for them as sort of high-level A&R folks who have contacts that maybe your label doesn't have or relationships that the label doesn't have. Because the label could approach an artist for a remix and the artist will quote one price, and artist to artist it could be free or whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how they did it, and they did that for a couple of years and it was great. And then at a certain point, Max really wanted to take it a different and independent direction. And this is keeping with, really positive relationships with Armada, frankly, with Misha Daniels and Ano and some of those other people there, Michael and Armin, of course. And, and that's what happened. And then roughly a year ago, Max and I got together and reimagined what a record label is. And we said, listen, what is a record label that we wish existed when we were getting into this?
Yeah.
And then we literally built it one day at a time with the mission of elevating the next generation of electronic artists, because we thought, you know what? Look, we've had Laid Back Luke on the label. We've had others. That's great. Obviously, we'll welcome them back. That's a given. But those people have the red carpet rolled in front of them already.
Right.
What about everybody who's in that between a part-time and a full-time person, or maybe they're full-time but they're playing one show a month, etc. In other words, what if we stop paying attention to certain factors? What if we don't care about your social numbers? What if we don't care about how many streams you're going to get? What if we simply go back to good old-fashioned A&R and say, which music speaks to us? What can we do with it? What if, especially as an early stage artist, what if we don't sign you into any options? Meaning you give us a track and then suddenly you owe us. We have first right of refusal for, let's say, 7 more records, or we sign you for an album deal, etc. What if we don't do that? What if we sign you by the track and then you're done? What if we celebrate the fact that we broke you as an artist and then DJ Chucky picked you up, which has happened, or Spinnin' or Armada, etc.? What if we look at ourselves as part of an ecosystem, which it is? Because this is what I think a lot of folks need to understand with labels, okay? Most labels, especially in electronic music, are part of an ecosystem, whether they acknowledge it or not, because we're all looking at each other, just like artists all look at each other. So listen, if Stampede or Musical Freedom or Warner or whoever are not picking up your music, and you think your music is there, okay, go down the ladder a little bit.
Yep.
Down the ladder a little further. Go down the ladder a little further. Create a precedent.
Yeah, this is actually this is a brief topic that, well, actually it was a pretty thorough topic that I talked about in, I think it was episode 3 when I had my buddy on. We were talking about branding, and this is kind of how you can figure out what your brand is or what it might be, is to find the top level artists that you relate your artistry the most with, and then you work your way down the ladder of the artist that's under that person, under that person, under that one, until you find someone that's relatively around the same position as you or a little bit bigger than you. And then you have a roadmap of how you should be following, like, your social media, how you should be running your social media, what you should be posting. So it's the same thing with record labels as well. If you're wanting to get, let's say you want to sign to Spinnin', but they're not going to sign you because I'd say Spinnin's probably one of those companies who you need to know someone that knows someone, plus your social. You need to be brandable. They need to be able to sell you. So if you can't sign to Spinnin, the best way to go that is find one of their child labels, or just find labels that are similar to them but smaller than them, and keep working under that until you find a label that you can actually get signed to. And then from there, you can kind of work with that label and then just work your way up the ladder until you hit that point. When you guys are putting, so yeah, let's kind of go to the beginning. When you guys are putting the label together, I think the number one question you should probably be asking, or the answers you should be looking for if you're starting a record label, is what are the meat and potatoes to the entire thing? What are contracts looking like? Getting artists signed, and kind of just starting it. Now, I know you said, so you guys went from Armada asking Max to start a label, and then did you guys separate from that and make something more independent? Did you guys already have the meat and potatoes in place?
So with Armada, we were a sub-label of Armada.
Yeah.
So in other words, they handled the distribution. There were a lot of things that we were under the umbrella of Armada. And when we took this thing independent, we were completely cut off from the mothership. So we literally had to, even though we had that, and there were certain advantages, of course, to that, and just seeing how things work at being a part of a larger organization. When we took this thing independently, we had to recreate everything from scratch, just like somebody who decides today to create their own label. Okay, we didn't have to pick a name. That's step one, right? You pick a name. Okay. Artist deals and recording contracts. Armada had one type of contract. We decided to have a completely different type of contract. So we had to, go to attorneys and et cetera. And okay, we had our contract. Then we had to figure out, well, which types of music do we want to sign? Distribution and logistics, right? So are we doing digital? Are we doing any physical distribution? Vinyl, CDs. I mean, that is still 10% of distribution, a lot of merch, etc. And then, we had to make our own business structure. And then of course, promote the music. And those are, we can get into a lot more detail, but those are the basic steps, no matter who you are in this world. It's, what are you putting out? What do the deals look like? How are you getting, how are you getting the music? Like, for example, right now, we're getting anywhere, if you can believe it, between 50 to 100 demos a day. There's some labels like Spinnin, who I'm sure are getting a lot more than that. On the flip side, I know some really great labels, and their biggest problem is they don't have enough sort of music flow. So they get maybe 5 to 10 demos a week. And so they're not putting out too much music, and literally their whole battle is not, hey, how do we get you placed on this playlist, etc. It's, how can we get artists to believe in the vision of this label? Right.
Producers, if you're wanting to start a record label as a producer, I think some of these things might come naturally if you can manage to make yourself successful. I say quote unquote successful because success is very what's the word, subjective, but from this podcast, everything I teach in this podcast can relatively be transferred over into starting a record label. I just did a 2-part series on email marketing and promotion for EDM producers. If you manage to get that right, and I did a separate episode completely focused on promo plans and doing promotion. If you can get the email marketing right as a producer, get the promotion right as a producer, that transfers over into what you're going to be doing with a record label. If you have a partner that's even better at promotion, you guys can combine ideas. Your promotion's pretty much set. Getting the whole contract stuff, would you say that's pretty much in the realm of just finding a music lawyer who you can tell what you're wanting to be included in the contracts, and they kind of handle all that stuff, all the rest of it?
100%. You just need one, unless you're going to get really fancy. We don't get fancy.
Yeah.
The thing is, and this is something for people to understand, is Well, I would say two things. First of all, talking about contracts, don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah.
Simplify. Whatever your vision is, divide it by 10 and you'll be better off.
Mm-hmm.
Just listen, contracts is one thing. And then the other thing is just don't treat it like a label. When you treat it like a label, it gets really confusing.
Yeah.
It's my business. No, just here's how you treat it. Okay. It's when you're an artist, you're putting out music because it's a form of expression. When you're a label, your entity is an artist, essentially. Work it like an artist, but with one big difference. We are not promoting you, okay? So you will notice, go on the NoFace Instagram, you will see Max mentioned maybe, or go on YouTube, go wherever you want. Max Angeli, who's a prominent artist, is probably mentioned 1 out of every 20 pieces of content. He's involved, but we are not making this the Max show. And that is very purposeful because we are ultimately a platform to elevate and help other artists, okay? So if you look at your entity and you say, listen, we are going to work this thing like an artist, build its reputation, build its profile, its branding, all that email marketing, like you said. And then on the flip side, we're not going to be inward focused. We're going to be focused on being in the service of other people. I think you'll be successful as long as you have maybe 2 to 5 years to dedicate to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you do much reading with like any self-help or business related books?
A little bit over the years.
Have you read The Go-Giver?
No.
It is a great book. That's actually a book I recommended to Chris when I was talking to him because our business models for your record label and my business, they're identical. All I'm trying to do is help out other artists. That's all I care about. That's all of my content is focused on helping out other producers, and it's all free content. And it's the go-giver mentality. You're just willing to help, not with no expectations. You're just reaching a hand out and helping people. And that's what the entire book is about. And it is fantastic. It's like 120, 130 pages. I mention it on this podcast probably every 2 or 3 episodes. It is one of the best books you can read, especially if you're wanting to be in the entrepreneur space. Because once you can adopt the go-giver mentality and business model, it's insane how it creates like a karma-like effect, whereas you're just helping people and that gets returned to you in dividends. It's insane how much success you can have with just trying to reach out and help people. And with that business model, I think a lot of artist-owned record labels miss that. I think a lot of artist-owned I think a lot of producers open up record labels solely to release themselves, and they will not release anywhere else. And I don't think that's necessarily the best idea. I don't think that's the best business model. But then I think a lot of artists' egos also get in the way of their own record labels in the sense that they don't want any artist to be bigger than themselves on that record label. And that can cause, it's a lot of ego getting in the way. And when ego gets in the way, things tend to fall apart pretty quickly.
So with the Go-Giver, was that something that really changed your business? Like, how did that come into your life?
Yeah, so there's a couple podcasts that I listen to religiously. One being the 6-Figure Home Studio, which is all about basically starting your own studio from your home. And then the other podcast I listen to is the Graham Cochran Show. And I don't know if you know who Graham Cochran is, but he runs the Recording Revolution, which is basically a course set on teaching studio owners how to record properly. And he's made, like 7 figures off of his business model. And he's just a genius when it comes to music business. But just like the other podcasts I listen to, hammer in the Go-Giver. And after they mentioned it like 20 times on their podcast, and I was like, okay, I need to get the book. So I got the book and I started reading it and I couldn't put it down. And it takes you through, I think it's like 5 different stages of what the Go-Giver mentality is and what it represents and how it can help you. And after reading it, it was just, it made so much sense. It makes you want to do more and do better and be better. And through that, your business just thrives. Once you're of the mentality of just trying to help someone out, and if they come to you asking for feedback or they're a potential client, whatever they are, if you can immediately provide them with value with no expectations, they can see that, oh, this person's actually trying to help me. And I find that like a lot of mixing and mastering studios, they don't adopt this and they don't realize that that's kind of the business model for studios. Is a lot of mixing and mastering studios will get a quote, they'll go, okay, here's the price. The artist will go, okay, I'll take that. And then they will just mix the track or master it, send it to them, and that's it. And they don't do anything else. They're not like, oh, well, what are your goals for this? Okay, you want to self-release? Okay, I can help you out with self-distribution in the sense that I know how to run this. You've never self-distributed. This is what you should do. Do you have a promo plan in place? No, you don't know what that is. Let me take you through the steps of what it looked like. Just trying to help them out in extension to whatever services you're already providing. And they look at that and go, this person basically went to the end of the world and back, or it seems so. It's all very easy things that they helped them out with, but they took their time to help them in extension to the service that they were already paid for at no additional fee. And that's how you create a returning client and a referral source, a really good referral source, and someone who's going to like give you really great reviews. My girlfriend's not super into reading like business books, but she read this one because it's in the story of a business fable. So it's easy to read. She couldn't put it. She read it in like, I think a total of 4 hours or something. If that, she couldn't put it down. She's actually just about to reread it again because it's just that good. But I think record labels, this is another industry that could adopt this this business model, and it can do wonders for them in the sense that you're talking about. Like, you guys might get 50 to 100 demos a day, and I'm sure 90% of those don't, if not more, don't work for NoFace. But if you see another record label who might be a little bit smaller or who releases the same kind of music as you, but doesn't have the amount of, like, they're not getting the demo flow that you're getting, it's an easy way to provide value to the artists and the record labels by saying, hey, this isn't going to work for us, but you should go reach out to this label. I think it would be a good fit here. You know, that's providing additional value instead of just saying, I'm not telling you how to run your business. You know, I'm just saying, like, go on.
I'm definitely going to read your book. Anybody listening should read this book. But I think we take a similar philosophy because you're totally right, which is all of us are on a path. And along that path, there's just all sorts of things and needs, and you know, there's more going on than whatever it is that you are selling, and we're all selling something.
Right.
But to your point about labels, that's just something that we adopted because, and I do hope other labels adopt that because, and mixing mastering folks, frankly, because the thing is that when you receive a demo as a label, to you, that's the beginning of the process. It's not. It's the end of a creative process for someone. So the question is, how can you get even further back and add value before and even after that process? So I'll give you an example. You know, if you go to our link tree, if you will, which you can find on the Instagram or anywhere, pretty much all of our socials, and you click it, you will find a list of 50 record labels, okay? Their contact information. We are one of those 50. The other 49 are Armada, I don't know, a bunch of them. And they're divided for you in neat little categories like EDM, trance, hardstyle, et cetera, et cetera. The purpose of that is very simple. It's to say, people, of course we want your music. But on the other hand, you know, as you pointed out, as a label, we're picking roughly 3 records out of the 300 to 700 records we're receiving every week.
Right.
That doesn't mean these other ones are bad. Some of them need work. Some of them don't work. But some of them are great records, but we're either full or we can't, or it didn't click with us for whatever reason. So if that's the case, here are a bunch of resources for you. And that's the attitude with everything. Give. We even created posts on how to create your own record label. Like in this world of the internet and everything that's going on, there's so much room for collaboration that if you think it's the world against you, it will be, but it doesn't need to be, you know?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think this is also a the selfish mentality of not wanting to give because you're afraid of someone else taking anything from you, one, that's completely false. That's not happening. There's enough for everyone. But I think that's a mentality. The selfish mentality is one that's adopted by producers fairly young. And I think it's because they don't have any success. And so when they see someone that's on the same level as them get a little bit of success, they get jealous and they don't want to work with that person and they want to stay as far away from them as possible. Instead of a rising tide raises all ships, instead of them saying, that's awesome, keep working at it, and them wanting to work with them and help them however they can, they don't realize that that's what's going to end up making them successful, someone else possibly being successful. I think record labels tend to do this a lot as well. But the fact that, I mean, you're on this show right now, you own a record label and you're here talking about how to start a record label. And it's because you know that someone's not going to come in and take anything away from you. You get plenty and you're going to continue to get plenty. And the best way to expand and grow is to give and help out other people. And that's
and let me tell you something else. It's even translated into unexpected business opportunities.
Yes.
Like, I'll give you an example. So we have this duo, these really great artists, Los Padres, who are from Orlando, and those guys, they've been releasing with us and other labels. They're touring. I mean, they're a really successful upcoming act. And, they approached us and said, guys, we know you have a distribution arm, because we do. We have we have our own answer to a CD Baby or DistroKid called NoFace Distribution. And they said, listen, we don't want to distribute our music there, but we do want to start a record label, and we don't necessarily want to deal with distribution and certain other things. Do you think we could, be a sub-label of you guys? And we said, well, we don't necessarily want a sub-label because we don't want to put anyone below us, but you can definitely be a part of this ecosystem. And we basically made a deal with them where they're literally in the process of launching their imprint. Our team's helping them out. There's some fees being exchanged, and everybody's really happy. And that was so unexpected, and it literally came from a place of, like you said, just listen, there's no secrets. Here's all the information. Do what you will with it.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest philosophies, but behind the go-giver mentality is the opportunities that come with it. When you're willing to help and give and someone becomes successful, maybe not directly because of your helping or giving, but it might be relatively a part of it. If that person becomes more successful than you, they're going to remember what you did for them. And that's going to help you out in turn. So let's bridge over to another topic. I think that's very important with a record label. It's kind of part of like the base of it is the whole marketing and promotion side of a record label. What does that look like for NoFace? What tips can you give to people who might want to start their own record label, but I think would also help out with producers just promoting their own music? Go if you want to kind of take the floor on that.
So a couple of things. So you need to see if a record is connecting or not. Okay, you can promote any record. You can put money into a record. You can put effort into a record. But there's a difference between, let's say, a ship with sails that's sailing where the wind is kind of blowing it and there's momentum, and where there's not momentum. And you can push both of those, but those are different things, and that's important for people to understand. Like, for example, we have a record coming out in less than 10 days by a guy named Now or Later. And, Kreider's been supporting it. Other artists have been supporting it. And there's just a lot of momentum. You can just see it. It's not that we treated it differently. It's not that anything happened. It's just that record is clicking for whatever reason. People are liking that record a lot, which is awesome. And when you have a situation like that, that's a really special situation because there's already momentum. And then you start thinking, and the thing is, we're really careful about marketing because oftentimes with labels, including us, marketing is recoupable. Okay. So meaning if we're going to spend $500, for example, on a record, or X amount on a music video or whatever the case may be, that's going to be recoupable from the royalties. And we're very careful about that because we don't want to put you in a position as an artist where you're not making any money off of your music for years to come. So that's something for people to really understand. But anyways, going back to the marketing, I think there's so many different types of marketing for artists, whether or not you're on a label, irrelevant. And the way to look at it is this. Who is your audience? Okay. Yep. So what I mean is, okay, let's take the example of a producer who literally has no budget. They're putting out tracks on SoundCloud or DistroKid or whatever the case may be, or some sort of label, and they don't have a budget. Fair enough. There's no problem. So if you have no budget, I would hope you have time. And if you have time, then you can do a few things. First of all, you can 2-3 weeks in advance, you can start working certain shows, go on 1001tracklist.com, start sending out your record. Additionally, okay, give people a story within the story. So for example, very simple thing. We tell every artist, make a tutorial video of how you made your record. That's popular content. Mm-hmm. Get more people involved. Create content around it. Create a little, video on TikTok or Instagram where you take the track, do something funny around it, etc. When you really break down everything you can do to push a record, even with no budget, you can create 2, 3, 5, 10 times as much traction. And then, of course, if you have budgets, I mean, the world's your oyster. The thing is, you got to be careful again, because is the track connecting? But for example, if you don't care and you have, I don't know, a $500, $1,000. I mean, I'm sure you and I could come up with all sorts of things. Okay, here's a legit company that can push your Spotify. Here's YouTube promotion, folks. Here's Submit Hub. Here's this. Mm-hmm. Here's that. And it's all about. But I think the main thing is just don't get lost in what's the budget. It's, is there a budget or not? If there isn't a budget, here's what you do. If there is a budget, do all the free stuff and the paid stuff.
Right. I think testing is super important too. Even if whether you have a budget or not, let's say you don't have a budget, then you have so much free reign in what you can test and really just test anything at that point, especially if you're a fairly young artist, if you're self-distributing. Test everything. Make TikTok videos. How did those go? Did they do well? No. If they did do a little bit well, how can you improve them? And then same with maybe let's see what a music video would do. If you know someone who's a videographer who you can either trade services with or lend a helping hand or something like that. If you don't have a budget, come to some conclusion with them, but test out all sorts of different marketing tactics until you find what works. And then same with a budget. If you have a budget, you want to be a little bit more careful with what you're testing, but don't be too constrained. Otherwise, you might not see any results at all, and you won't get any sort of test factors out of that, and you won't know what actually works.
That's a really good point, which is you need a test. In other words, if you have, for example, $1,000, don't put all of it in one thing. No. Test in tiny little increments. That's a really good point. And frankly, email marketing, which you mentioned earlier, of course, if you have an email list and you're one of those folks, work on building it. It's very doable.
Yeah, email lists are, a lot of people don't. I was one of them a year ago. I was like, email's dead. What are you talking about? And then I had it broken down for me. I realized, oh yeah, people have had the same email for the last 10 years, and they're gonna have the same email for the next 10 years. When Facebook's dead, Instagram is dead, your followers are gone. But if you have that email of 20,000 people, that's there. That's not leaving unless they unsubscribe. And people don't unsubscribe as often as people think. And it's a way to get directly in front of your audience that wants your content. So that's something that I think a lot of producers should be investing more time in. And if you're a producer needing to invest in your email marketing list, one of the easiest ways to grow your email marketing list, which is pretty much how I do it, is offer a free sound pack. I have a free sound. If you go to enviousaudio.com/sound pack, you can go there and you can get a free sound pack from me. That's 30 sounds for free, just for signing up on my email list. And that's, I'm sure all of the producers listening here use Serum, which is what my sound pack is in, and I'm sure they all design their own sounds. If you spend a month designing a 30 sound pack, You can offer that for free, get people on your email marketing list, throw $2 a day at social media ads. It goes quick. People want that kind of content. So it's easy to grow that stuff if you take the time. I mean, take the time and test things out. When you're testing ads too, I think what's important is have a duplicate of the same ad, but then just change one thing at a time to see what works best. Change the headline, whichever headline works best. Go to the next one, test the text itself, test an image, and kind of break it down until eventually after a month or two, you'll have a really solid ad that's converting really, really well. And that's super easy to do with tracks. I think Spotify ads are really underrated for some artists. I don't see a lot of producers implementing Spotify ads, and I think that could be a really influential source for promoting a track. If you have yourself talking over your track leading into the drop, hey, this is my new track coming out on September 10th, and that's 2 weeks away. Click the link below to go save the link. And it goes into the drop, and you play 10 seconds of the drop. If someone's already listening to that music, they're going to be like, oh, shit, let me just click this, save this, and then go back to the other playlist.
Have you ever tried running Spotify ads for what you're doing? Like, for example, saying, hey, here's 30 sounds, go grab them, et cetera, et cetera. Like, does that work or no?
I haven't tried that yet. I am about to. I'm actually about to shoot. I've got a good buddy of mine who's just a fucking incredible videographer who is going to help me shoot a commercial. I'm going to do like a 3-minute commercial, but they're going to be broken into 1-minute segments, but it's going to basically be all one of my mixing and mastering studio and kind of that stuff. And then part of the other minute is going to be my sound pack. And I've got my buddy who's actually making a track out of all the sounds right now. And so he's going to be featured in the ad. And then I'm going to do one for the podcast. So I'm planning on doing that. I'm going to be running like the whole commercial on YouTube, the full 3-minute long commercial on YouTube. Because that's where, the video ads do really well there. And then I'm going to break up like the sound pack. I think I'm just going to take the audio, throw that on Spotify and test that out, as well as the podcast. I'm hoping to do that in June. But I think there's opportunity there. I think there's stuff that could, I think it's just because people are already on the platform. So it's so much easier for them to just click something on their phone or on their desktop and go directly to the same platform, just save something, and then that's it. Or like the podcast, going in, subscribing, and then going back to wherever they're listening to.
And you know what? Speaking of what we're talking about, the thing I think to understand as well is there are so many marketing channels. Yes, okay, there's Facebook and Instagram, but you just pointed out Spotify. Yeah. You can find a niche site that's specific to Brazil. You can use ad networks. There's influencer marketing. There's TikTok influencers. It's just what's important to understand about this stuff is that when you really dive into it, there's so many opportunities. And yeah, you have to find those, needles in the haystack, but there's so much going on the internet. It's disgusting.
Yeah. It's really just about finding what works for you, because not one thing is going to work exactly the same for the person next to you. And so you just got to, test it and work it. And this is where a lot of people kind of go, they work at it for a month and then they go, and nothing's working. Well, you didn't invest enough time. You got to really work at it for a solid 6 months, if not a year, until you break down into something that works. It's just a lot of testing that you have to do. And yeah, like you said, there's so many different marketing things that you could possibly do. It's just the fact of finding where your target market is, and that's where you might want to spend more time in doing that. Do you guys create any sort of customer avatars at all?
Customer avatars, we don't. We don't do any customer avatars yet. But tomorrow's a new day. So who knows?
Yeah. So that's what I do. I do a new customer avatar about every 6 months or so, kind of basing off of where I'm currently at. And that, for anyone listening, what that looks like is I make up a fake customer. I put a name on there, their age, what their income is, what their job is, what their goals are, what their dreams are, and then like places they're hanging out at. And it gives you a good image and representation of who it is you're wanting to be involved. Let's say with a record label, who you're wanting to get signed onto the record label. And then you figure out where these people are at, and that's where you can kind of invest some more of your marketing, whether you're wanting to get demos or if your target market audience, people listening to the specific genre that you are putting out.
We do that. At least I do it. And I've heard the term a buyer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, especially, what's interesting? We did this exercise, Max and I, maybe 6 months ago, and we did exactly what you're talking about, which is when we were, well, I guess we're still in the early stages of this, but we looked at different people, like, hey, this person's this age, this is maybe this kind of job that they have, et cetera, et cetera. But I'll tell you something really interesting. I find back then we were right about certain things, we were wrong about certain things. I find it interesting to do it first theoretically when you don't know. But the other thing that I would encourage a lot of people to do, whether you're a producer and you have a fan base, or you're a record label person, or you're a mixing mastering engineer, whatever pieces of the puzzle you are operating in, get on the phone with your audience, okay, as much as humanly possible. Don't be afraid. There doesn't need to be some wall in between you. I'm literally on calls almost every day with our people, whether they're paying customers, whether they're audience members, community members in the Discord, whatever the case may be. You got to get to know those people, because I can promise you have all sorts of ideas about them. And the more you confront reality, the more they will challenge your ideas and really enlighten you.
I agree 100%. I have people who, because we have a Facebook community for the podcast, and I've got people in there who will disagree with some of the things I say, and they'll make me challenge my thinking, and it's a great exercise, and it makes you think, okay, maybe I am doing something wrong. Not wrong, I guess is the term, but maybe there's something I could be doing to improving whatever it is, whether it's your business model, whether it's your personal influences, or it might even be based off of your own personal life. I think one of the one thing that comes to mind for producers is attitude towards things. I think a lot of producers can improve their attitudes towards situations, specifically with posting on social media a lot. That can kind of I've got a lot of producers that I'm friends with on Facebook, but I'm not personally friends with them. And I see them promoting tracks, and they release really good stuff, but then they start going off about other people in the industry, or how terrible their situation is, or their life, or whatever. And it puts a bad stain on their image as a producer. And I know they've got 2,000, 3,000 other people that they're friends with that they're not really friends with. They're just people in the industry, and that can turn a lot of people off. And so I think it's important to kind of check yourself when you aren't doing that thing, when you're not getting in front of people and getting your voice out there in a positive way, And a lot of that does have to do with interacting with your audience. If you're not interacting with your audience and you create this wall, which I think a lot of producers tend to do, and then you start getting a fan base, but then they find out you're making all these very personal, maybe attacks isn't the right word, but you put a bad taste in their mouth based off of what the things you're posting on social media. It can turn on you really, really quickly, and it's not fun when that happens at all. But it's important to challenge yourself in your thinking. There's no better way to do that than to be talking to your audience about those kinds of things,
Yes, and I'll give you two quick examples. So the audience, in a very direct way, changed something that we did, which is really awesome. So we used to not reply to demos like a lot of labels. So we'd get a demo. If it was signed, great, welcome. If not, then that's that. And we just figured, we don't have time. We need to keep going as quickly as possible. And then a number of people said, yeah, but we want to get an answer, blah, blah. And we literally changed it. So now if you send an email to demos@NoFaceRecords.com, we'll reply within 2 weeks and tell you yes, no, or even if there's time, a maybe, which means, look, this is good, but we need to change this, blah, blah, blah. And then the other thing I'd say to your point about, producers and or artists in general, and kind of their attitude about social media. The person who I really want to address in this conversation is these folks who say, look, I got into this to be a musician, to be an artist, and I don't want to post. I don't want to do this social media stuff. I just want to be in the studio, blah, blah, blah. And here's where I would challenge you. If you really believe that 100%, that you only want to be in the studio and you want to put out music and you don't want to be out in public, you might as well be a ghost producer.
Yeah.
Because your art will be out there, your form of expression will be out there, or for example, do scoring. There are many roles for a behind-the-scenes person where you don't need social media in that way, okay? But I don't believe that because you're taking these press shots and you're DJing here and there. You clearly love that attention. Give me a break.
Yep.
And all I would say is, listen, just embrace that. I'm not saying you have to be Freddie Mercury or you have to be Fisher or you have to be some sort of larger than life persona if that's not who you are. But, listen, I am on your podcast right now because I want to be out in public, okay, for a number of reasons. And you're making this podcast because you want to be out in public for a number of reasons. If you are making music for the masses, you are obvious. The music industry is all about that.
Yep.
If that's not you, make music for your friends. Play on a guitar around a fire. I'm just saying, guys, let's be real about this for a second.
Yeah, it's social media is an interesting one because you do have those people who they're walking oxymoron where they say they don't want to. I'm in it for the music and I just want to make good music and release it, but I don't want to post and blah blah blah. But then they are doing, like yours, doing press shots, playing shows, doing all these things to be out in front of a crowd. It's like, well, you got to figure out what you want then, because I don't know if you know exactly what you want, and that might cause some friction and some issues. And that I just did a ghost production episode where that was part of the thing that we were talking about is if you want to be full time as a producer, but you don't want to be out in front of people, ghost productions, you can make great money. You can make a great living off of ghost production. So long as you're a good writer, you know how to produce a track, you can make a good living off of just writing music, sitting in your home, sitting in your studio, doing that. But if you want to be out in front of people, you can hire a PR team. Like, you can hire people who will post for you, but you have to accept that you have to pay the money for that. You can't sit there and complain about it. So you got to really kind of figure out what you want to do. And that takes some soul searching. That just takes up more time. So if you're not willing to wait and put in the time to figure that stuff out and you're too impatient, you're going to kind of be stuck in this loop, in this hole that's just going to drag you down the more and more you're in it.
It's important to reflect from time to time, and I'm a person who does take at least one day a week off. I try to do two. It usually ends up being one. But regardless, I think it's important to reflect. It's important to have family time. It's important to have friend time, girlfriend time, all that stuff.
Yep.
But on the other hand, and I'm speaking from personal experience as somebody who was lost for years, different points of my life, okay? Intellectualizing makes you a very bitter person who is busy analyzing things and so on, versus if you just do, even if you're in the fog and you don't really know what's going on. I mean, I feel like when you're pursuing anything, it's just a combination of being lost and then you sort of power through it and then you're found again. And it's all about doing, and you learn by doing rather than intellectualizing too much. Right.
Yeah, I totally agree. So real quick too, I mentioned something before we lost connection. I was getting into, I think when I was talking about the customer avatar stuff, let's say you're looking at your listener, creating a customer avatar for your listener, and based off of what genre they listen to. NoFace, you guys seem to be releasing a lot of bass house, electro style stuff, but you guys haven't always released that. It seems like you guys kind of release somewhat of a plethora of different genres. If someone's starting their own record label, now obviously if they're going to be a sub-label under a different, a larger record label, I'm sure that label has some say in what you're going to be releasing. But let's say you're just starting an independent record label. Do you recommend that someone releases one genre, they niche down for a while until they get bigger and they can kind of spread out? or should they just release whatever is good?
Huh. That's a good question. Probably for most people, I would say definitely pick some sort of niche, just so because it'll make it easier for you to build connections there, get to know that world. That's like every culture and subculture has certain influencers, certain other people. There's a lot going on, and that is a way to really focus you, and that is good advice. On the flip side, I would say it depends on your situation and where you're coming from as well. So, for example, if you just have access to tons and tons of music, or I don't know, there's a reason, sure, then do it. Like, I'll give you an example. So we started as a house label. We were very much a house label, very much progressive house, like, which is Max's background and Big Room and all of that. And then one day there was no logic to
No
this.
meeting.
There was nothing. One day we said, wait a minute, but we've been doing this for over 10 years. Okay, the same thing. And we feel like we know the players. Okay, so you name me somebody in the house scene, through 1 or 2 degrees, we probably know each other. And so, and then we thought, well, in the case of this label, and it's a very long-term play, I have to tell you. We just felt like, look, nobody has a monopoly on what we call fire, right? So there can be fire tracks, which are trance, which are trap, which are rhythm, which are house, which are hard style, which are a lot of things, techno. And so we started signing, of course, still in the house direction, but also a lot of that other stuff. Like we're getting ready to put out our first hard style track, which I'm really excited about.
Okay.
And but that was a conscious effort. And here's the other thing. Max and I, so everyone listening understands, we were business partners in other things after sort of getting to a certain level in music, like we started investing in real estate and other things. So we just came into this label thing in a position where it's not that we have yachts and Ferraris or anything, but we're not working to make a paycheck. Okay. And that allows us to take a really, really long-term view. And so part of the reason why we're signing hardstyle is because we've decided we want to give upcoming hardstyle folks a chance, and we really want to build bridges and get to know the hardstyle world. Okay. And it may take years to do that. And the other thing is, so I guess what I'm saying is I'm coming to this as a person who has committed at least 10 years of his life. Until 2030, I will be doing this.
Yes.
And but on the other hand, if you're trying to grow something where you're trying to make, ends meet right now, or grow something in the very short term, there's a huge difference between, look, I'm trying to do something in the next year versus I'm trying to do something in the next decade.
I think that is a huge distinction that a lot of people need to make and understand. Same with me. I started my studio in 2018, and I knew going into it, I was like, okay, this is something I'm gonna have to work at. This is like for a while, and I might have to accept that it's gonna be tough taking a paycheck, or taking any money just out of the business. Almost every penny I make just immediately gets invested in the business, and it's been going like that for 2 years now. And I understand it's probably gonna be 5, if not closer to 10 years before I'm actually making a livable wage just off of everything I'm doing. But that's just what it takes. If you can accept that it's going to take a while for you while you're working hard at something, then you're more than likely going to be successful at it. It's just the time aspect. So many people are impatient and they want it in a year or two. They want something so short term, but they don't realize that, dude, I think a lot of producers don't realize a lot of their idols who kind of just start making it big, they're pushing 30, if not their mid 30s. And they don't realize that they've been working at it since they were 15, 16, 20 years old. So if you're 20 years old listening to this and you've been producing for 2 years and you think you're going to get something when you're 24, understand you're probably not going to get something till you're 28 or close to 30. But if you're working at it as hard as you're working at it, by the time you're 30, you might have something. It's just a matter of accepting that you gotta take the time and invest the time, and fucking work hard. You know, again, part of this podcast is just teaching producers how to go full time and the ways that they can do it, the ways that they can make money other than being a touring artist, because it's so rare and so hard to be that full time. You know, be a Tiesto, be a Hardwell, be these huge producers who are making crazy amounts of money. Those are so few and far between. But if you can find a different facet within music production, whether that's selling sample packs, doing mixing and mastering work, maybe starting a record label, but again, you might not be able to take a paycheck out of those kinds of things for a little while. But if you can find something that's going to help supplement your income so that you can focus more on production and the live DJing stuff, it's going to make life so much. You're going to be able to do the things that you want. You can produce while you're running this business on the side that's actually making you money, so that you can invest more time into promo, getting signed with record labels, getting a tour manager, those kinds of things, you know?
Well, and let's talk about my friend Misha Daniels, who recently left Armada. So Misha Daniels was a DJ, a producer DJ, and he did that for years. And to be honest with you, it's been so long, I don't remember the level that he got to, but he got to a certain respectable level. And then at a certain point, he decided, you know what, I'm going to go the sort of music executive direction, and became, you know, really an important part of A&R at Armada, especially when they were, you know, still coming up, and worked there for probably a decade. And then recently, started his own operation as an artist manager, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, like you said, of course, there's, you know, you have cases like a Tiesto, like a David Guetta, where they went in, they did this, and that's that. But on the flip side, none of this is for nothing. And if you go 7 years of just grinding music production, etc., and you reach a level, but you don't necessarily reach that level that you were dreaming of, that's okay, because there's always an opportunity to pivot and to still take all of that knowledge, all of those connections and everything else, and do something else, like you're saying, mixing, mastering, sample packs, working within the industry of music, etc., etc. There's so many opportunities.
That's the basis of this show, is there's so many different things that you can do. And if you feel like at some point that the production thing you might change paths. That's what happened to me. I was 6 years into production, and I was thinking, or no, I was like 5 years. I was 5 years into production, and a lot of it had to do with me overworking myself with production. I was like, I don't like it anymore. I've lost the love for it, and I worked it out of my system, which sucks. But I found this other thing that I realized I used to hate mixing. It was the worst thing ever. I used to never master. And then I was like, well, okay, I finally learned how to actually properly mix something. So I'm like, I'm getting the hang of this now. I go, well, I work better with other people and helping others. So let me try doing some lessons with producers with the things I learned. And I was working with producers that didn't know much. And I realized, holy shit, I know what I'm talking. Like, that's all of a sudden it clicked in these lessons. I knew what I was talking about and what I was doing. And I was making them sound better. And they were learning, and they were so happy. And I realized, holy shit, this feels way better than just having a great track and people saying this is a great track. It's beyond way better. And so I found something out of what I loved, something that I loved even more. And the thing about production's always, I still have my studio. Production's always going to be here. If I want to produce, I'm producing actually way more than I have in like 2 years. I've been making like 2 or 3 tracks a month now. More tracks than I was making.
You probably have a bigger frame of reference. You probably have, because you're exposing yourself to all this music. How people, I mean, wow, what a bird's eye view, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And it was like, you know, after I took my hiatus, because I realized, okay, I need to take a break from this. It's causing too much stress. After I took my hiatus, I was like, okay, I'm not going to produce unless I have that itch. And it comes every once in a while. Like it's been more frequent now where it's like, I don't know what it is, but I'm sitting around or I'm playing video games or something. And then there's just something inside me that's like, open up a project, just open up a project and start working. And I'm like, within an hour, I'm like, this is the best fucking thing I've ever made. And if you can get to that point, it feels so much better than just I need to be in the studio right now, and you're sitting there for 2 hours and you can't come up with a single melody, so you walk out of it upset and pissed. That was terrible. That was not healthy. And some of you might get to that point. I know some of you will get to that point, but know that it's not all for nothing. If you stop producing, you're not a failure. You can pivot into something else. You can take what you've learned and make a business model out of it, or work for someone else within that same business model, and you can be successful. It's just, what are you going to do with that information, and how are you going to apply it to whatever it is that you want to apply it to?
Yes, and a friend of mine was in rock bands for years at a pretty successful level, touring festivals, that kind of thing, and then switched over and became a producer.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I'm just not going to bring him up because I don't even know if I have permission to talk about his life. But regardless, in his sort of mid 30s, he got tired of the pressure of putting out a record. Did it click? Did it not? What do my fans think? Just kind of like yourself. You're just ready for a change, but still very much loved the music.
Mm-hmm.
And he ended up getting into the world of syncing, and
Mm-hmm.
and it took a while to make that take off, but now he's in such a great position because he gets to be a studio person. He doesn't have any socials. He doesn't need any socials. He has just 5 or 6, companies that are constantly sending him work for commercials and movies and this and that. And everybody's thrilled.
A record label is another great one where you're heavily involved in the industry, and you can include, like, if you're signing tracks to your own record label, you're not necessarily producing anymore, but you have mixing and mastering knowledge. You can mix and master the tracks that are put onto so you're still involved in a creative process, and you're still loving the music that people are putting out, and you're enjoying it. Like you were saying, I think the key factor there is, you're not doing it for a paycheck. You're doing it because you love it. You love the music and you want to help out other people. If you can accept that and you can take that as a business model, you're going to be successful. It's just, it naturally comes when you're that kind of person, instead of having, closed doors and closed walls, and you're just trying to be the person behind the screen and that's it. When you get to that, it's tough to expand beyond any sort of scope if you're that enclosed and you're not willing to open up.
100%.
I think that might be it, Dennis. We've pretty much covered everything. I think this is a really, really awesome episode. Do you go ahead and plug all of your guys' stuff? You guys are doing a boat party, is that right? Coming up?
We're doing a boat party, and listen, we do everything cheap, okay, and affordable, because we are not trying to target millionaires. If you're a millionaire, by all means. We are understanding that most people who love the music are working a job, whatever the case may be. We're not targeting a moneyed crowd, okay? Mm-hmm. So that is why, if you look at our label merch, it's literally around 50% cheaper than all the other labels. I just, what it cost us plus a few more bucks, that's all it is. This boat party, Christian, cost $19.99 a head, okay? $19.99 a head. You're sailing the canals of Fort Lauderdale. We are chasing the sunset. Max Angeli's playing. Some of the other DJs like Zach and some of our upcoming players are playing as well. It might be 2.5 hours, might be longer. And we have a very simple appeal. We're like, guys, listen, we are doing this the second Corona's over, when we're allowed to do it. And we know you're all going to want to rage, because we do. And the more people who buy tickets, the bigger the boat gets. It's that simple. It'll at least be a 50-person boat, but we're happy to make it 100, 150, etc. And if you think the tickets are covering the boat, no, it's tickets plus booze, and we might even lose money on this party. So
I might need to book a flight out there. My sister lives out in Florida, so I might need. I know flights are cheap. I might need to book a flight and come out there and party with you guys.
And let me tell you something else, just to get a head count. And I'm so grateful to people in Italy, the UK now, US and Canada, who've been buying pre-sale tickets. We even made them 11% cheaper, $17.99 to get on the fucking boat, okay? So that's what we're doing. Otherwise, I want to plug, Richard, who I totally did not mention, who's a member of our team and does paid marketing like a god, as well as, of course, creating a lot of content. I do appreciate that. Additionally, of course, a few quick plugs. So if you are an electronic artist, and of course, most, if not all of you are, send your unsigned electronic music to demos@NoFaceRecords.com. We will reply within 2 weeks. Also, I do want to plug our Discord chat server. We, Christian, if you can believe it, it's about to hit 1,000 people. 1,000 people.
I just joined it last week. I was like, damn, this is popping off. There's some good tracks in there, good producers in there that are posting for feedback, all that stuff. Promotion.
And let me tell you something else. We encourage NoFace artists, and this includes Max, this includes everybody, to go in. There's a feedback section. There's a section to set up collabs. We just opened a Spanish chat, which is awesome for all the Spanish speakers. There's a general chat. But the main thing is, there's music producers, and by the way, people, don't just limit yourself to NoFace's Discord. There's Monster Cat. There's so many Osla. There's, we could go on and on. Bottom line, though, the Discord, we do have the NoFace Discord, and producers, artists, hardcore listeners of electronic music, and it's just a great place. If you're not feeling motivated, go in there, and that energy is infectious.
Yeah.
Okay, and learning, of course. And other than that, I don't know what else to say. Listen to, of course, go on Spotify, elsewhere. Do support NoFace Radio. Oh, that is one other thing I want to plug, and I do appreciate all the DJs around the world that are listening and picking up our records. We do appreciate. There's so many of you, honestly. And we just launched episode 2 of NoFace Radio, and I think what makes NoFace Radio special is that Max hosts it, Max Vangeli, and then we only put NoFace music, which means every episode you're going to hear tracks that you've never heard anywhere.
Hell yeah. That's awesome. I like the sound of that.
And that's it. And again, listen, I appreciate everything you're doing, and I so appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you and your audience, and to just let them know a little bit more about the scene, and any opportunities that we could possibly give, plus everything that you taught. I've really learned a lot, honestly.
Yeah. Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate the kind words. Thanks so much for coming on. This is a really good episode. I'm super glad we were able to get together, and you're definitely gonna be a returning guest on another topic. We'll cram down these guys' throats, but thank you so much, everyone. All the links he just talked about, I'm going to have them on the episode show notes. You just have to go to enviousaudio.com/episode 26. Everything we talked about in this episode, all the links will be there. You guys can go check out their Discord, their Instagram, their demo, email, all that stuff. But thanks for everyone for hanging out, and thank you, Dennis. You have a good day, man.
All right, you too, man. Thanks again.